So did everybody get to watch the videos I sent out? Okay, I see heads nodding. You didn't watch yourself, Ramon?
I watched like 5 minutes of it, and then I got busy and distracted.
Oh, okay. So you didn't see all the things I cut out and all the things I added, huh?
No, the good stuff.
So Ramon, thank you very much for that presentation on the blenders. That was very helpful. And it was kind of hard to see, but you talked about putting a negative hone on one of the blades. Was it the tooth blade you were putting the hone on, the negative hone on?
Yeah, it was a tooth blade, and you just have to put it just maybe a 16th or eighth of an inch at an angle, and then pull towards you if you're using a honing stone. And it doesn't really matter what angle you have, but once you have that negative angle, what's more important is that you keep it really thin. If it's wide, it's not going to cut. That's why I always put the negative angle first, and then I put an edge on it, because naturally putting the edge on the tooth blade is going to narrow that negative hone down, or whatever hone you have on there.
Okay, thank you. And so on the blenders, those teeth don't have notches, as opposed to the thinners. These don't have notches on the teeth, correct?
You know, some have notches, the V notches, some don't. The tough ones are the ones that have that really spiky up and down. They call them the dragon. And those are really a pain in the butt. And with that one, all I can do is you just have to have a really good flat hone so that the teeth are sharp. And then just take a cheater stick or your hone and lightly go down. But yeah, those are a pain in the butt. I don't even know why they exist. And if you do have a little bit of V or flat, if you can edge them, I always put a light edge on there.
And on the blenders, which one of the blades does most of the cutting? Is it the tooth or the solid blade?
Oh, they both cut. I mean, whoa, what happened there? Let's close those.
There you go.
There we go. They both cut. I mean, you got a piece of metal, so they're both doing work.
And that ramp is just to keep the teeth from crashing. Is that correct?
Just to keep them from feeling smoother. But another thing is, once you get to cut, that very, very, very back, these three, you have to get a really aggressive ramp in case somebody's heavy-handed. Either they put their thumb all the way through so that you don't do the shear. It cuts well with you because you're light-handed. And then 2 days later, and 2 hours away, they call you, and my shears got stuck. Why? It's because they're so heavy-handed. So I always in the back 2, 3, 4, I put a really, really aggressive angle or negative angle or ramp on it. Because you're not cutting with the back anyway.
And like similar to the blenders, would the tooth blade on chunkers, would you put a negative hone on those teeth?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, yep. I didn't know that. I didn't know you were supposed to put a negative hone on the chunkers and the blenders. I never have, but that's good to know. I mean, that's why I sign up for these things. I always learn something.
Yeah, chunkers. How's your experience been with not putting them on?
I just did a pair of blenders today. At least I think they're blenders. They're not thinners. The teeth don't have notches, and the teeth don't look as big as chunkers. So I'm guessing they're probably blenders. But I tested them before I started doing anything, and they cut somewhat. So okay. And so I ended up sharpening both blades, and now they cut great. The hair just popping right off of there, and I never put a negative hone on. I watched your video before I worked on them, but I did them the way I always do them. But I just wanted to check with you, and maybe I should be. I mean, maybe they're going to crash for the customer in a few days, and I wouldn't know that, until they call me or something. But
yeah, well, if you want, I mean, give me a ring and I'll send you a couple real cheapy blending shears that you can purchase at like $5 a piece because I got millions of them, and you can just beat them up and play with it, so you don't have to experiment on your customers' tools.
These were, the ones I worked on today were shark fins.
Okay, yeah, those are good. You know, a lot of times too, if they come at decent shear, and you put a light edge on it, you know it's going to feel good. So I guess less is more sometimes. What do you think,
Hey there, Ramon. First of all, I gotta say thanks seeing you this time. Last time, Ramon and I had a previous conversation about thinners, and there was a problem that I was having. And I gotta say, the discussion that we've had has significantly improved my ability to sharpen thinners. I got about 5 or 6 questions for you. I'll try to work through them. One of the things that I find difficult is when you're taking the tooth blade up and you're holding it up to the straight bar for checking the set of the teeth. You know, when you're looking through, is there any trick that you can really look to see what is the separation of the teeth? Because the light coming through the fingers makes it hard to see if the teeth are off the bar, and if there is that set. I find it's really difficult. Like on the back blade, it's really easy because that's just like any other shear. But when you're looking through, because your teeth are away from you, I've even tried flipping it around so the teeth are towards me to try to see if there is that, you know, the tip, that arch in the teeth. And I've really struggled with trying to really assess what is the set of the tooth blade.
You know, a lot of times I like to have a little set, but if it's totally flat, I'll leave it. Because if there's enough curvature on the solid blade, then that'll compensate. But all I do is I'll put the tooth blade up on the bar, and rather than trying to look through, I'll just press down and see if it has any spring action. So I'm not really looking for light. I'm just kind of looking to see if, try just looking to see if you can see it, you know, little bounce action. That's what I would suggest.
Okay, so you're basically just looking for a little bit of action. Thank you.
Yeah. Even if there's no action, if it's dead nuts flat, I'll ignore it. I'll first do the whole shear the way it should be done, and then see if, again, if the solid blade compensates enough, and you know, if it cuts. And I also found out that I always use Viva to test. That is so hard because sometimes it won't cut the Viva, but it'll cut hair. And if it cuts Viva, obviously it'll cut the hair. Sometimes, particularly when more of a German style shear that doesn't have that hone line, don't use Viva, I found out, because you it's so frustrating. I would just use a normal paper towel and then test on fur or hair or whatever you have. So that's not a end-all test.
And Patrick, coming back to your sharp fins, a good quality thinning shear is easier to sharpen than a poor quality thinning shear.
Always.
Always, always, always. Going back to some of the videos, in the first video, there was a part where when you're working on the ride line and there was a hole that appeared. I have seen this before where you turn around and do the marker and the hole, and I'm just putting this out to anyone who watches the questions and everyone that participates, is I turned around and done my ride line with my marker on, and the markers come off, but the hole is still there. So even though you see the ride line gone, don't assume that it's truly finished the ride line. Like, you noticed it, everyone noticed it once you started looking the light down the ride line. I would always recommend people sort of walk the light down the ride line to see if it's continuous, because those little holes I've seen pop up both on thinning shears and on regular shears. So that was a really great catch, because that's a hard one to tell people.
So then what did you do then? Once, I mean, it got rid of the red.
I just did like you did. You know, it's very small, and just kept on working through the whetstone to work it down because it's, you know that, like if you take marker off, you're close to it. But I've had it happen mid-blade. A lot of times I've seen it at the tip of the blade. I always make the habit of ensuring that I walk that light down the ride line to make sure I don't have any holes. The other thing that I'll look for is, did that ride line go all the way out to the edge? Because sometimes if the blade is like this, the edge is so rounded around that your ride line isn't going right up to the edge of the blade. So that's another thing that I keep an eye on is that ride line going right to the edge? Because if I'm sharpening the outside, it may not make it to the ride line. And I've had some problems like that.
So do you work the outside edge and then the ride line, or you work the ride line and then the outside edge?
I work the ride line first, then I work the outside edge, and then I will see, like, if you're pulling out a burr and I assemble it and I've got a spot that doesn't cut, I'll go back and look for, did that edge go all the way to the thing. It's more like an advanced area of looking for that edge, especially if you got an area that is not cutting or it fails, like it's not so much with texturizers, but it fails the wet cut test.
So do you hone just once? You hone, then outside edge, and then?
I primarily hone once, but if I have a problem, I'll go back and hone again. Okay. Especially if I've got an area that I visually see, but it sometimes catches me because I got a couple of shears that, problem shears. You think everything's working, and there's just something that's not working right. Like your tip, you had a problem with one of them, and the two tips were not doing it. I had that happen with a pair of texturizers the other day, where the previous sharpener had turned around, and when he was doing the ride line, he lifted up, and he did tilt it like this, and all of a sudden it became a real problem for those last two teeth because he didn't stop and lift up. And when he tilted up, he took that ride line and curved it, not just the cutting edge, but it was the ride line. So it made it really difficult to get rid of.
Yeah, I cannot tell a lie. I've ground a tooth or two down in my time just because I was so sick and frustrated, hoping that they wouldn't notice that's a little shorter, or it's rather than 44 tooth, that's a 42 tooth. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, another question in this video, you talked about using your cheater stick. It can be the white one or the pink one. I think the white, Bonnie, is it correct? The white one is the finer one?
It's supposed to be, but I use them interchangeably. Okay. Yeah, I guess I prefer the pink.
At various times, like I've always used the cheater stick on the outside of the teeth. So if this is my teeth, I'll use it to pull back this way towards the ride line. There was a couple of times I think we used the cheater stick for knocking the burr off the ride line. But most of the time I use it right at the very end. If it doesn't cut, I'll pull back in areas that are not cutting, just to roughen that up. So that it holds the hair.
You're perfectly correct. What I do is I'll take the tooth, I'll hone it, I'll put the negative, I'll put an edge on the teeth side, and then before I put it together, I take the cheater stick and just kind of do it lightly over with the negative. I kicks the burr the other way. Then once they're together, I do exactly what you say. I take the cheater stick and knock that burr the other way, because a lot of times it won't cut. Maybe sometimes it does cut, but it won't cut, and then it's because the burr gets kicked over. So you're 100% correct.
Yeah, it's that last. If something doesn't work right, use this step as the last thing, and sometimes it really helps.
You could teach the class. That's absolutely correct. The only one thing, going back to the hone, I don't know what Jim and Patrick do, but I first hone, I put my edge, then I hone again, and then I deburr. What do you do, Jim?
That's the way I do.
I do hone, edge, and then I'm just deburring. Yeah, I'll hone again to deburr, to flip that burr back.
Okay.
Because like if the burr is there, I want that to flip back.
Right.
And then I'll use a buffer stick, sometimes back and forth, to get rid of the burr.
Yep.
Another question for you. Shear tension. So a lot of times we're adjusting the screw. I have found some thinners like to be loose, some thinners like to be tight. Some become, like, if they get too tight, some thinners get worse at their ability to cut. Can you think of any reason or some part of the sharpening process that causes the difference in tension results?
I would maybe the how much bow you have in the shears. You know, if you have too much bow, it's easier to loosen it than to tighten it. And I know that groomers like to have it loose, which kind of sucks because, particularly for the longer ones, you don't have the force at the tip because it's further away. So it kind of counters. And even with normal shears, we'll put more bow, and the longer shears compensate for them liking it loose, both their blenders and their shears. So I would think it all has to do with the set. I mean, that's just off the cuff logic. I mean,
no, that's exactly what it. You know, when you have a wealth of experience and you start to see these problems, sometimes it's kind of like you need a person that can at least give some insight because they probably encountered it but never thought about how they fixed it. So it's good to think about that, and if there's any answers to these questions that come up, you think of it afterwards. Just pipe back to the question. If all of a sudden our brain says, "Oh yeah, I remember this now."
yeah, you know, just to reiterate, when I did that seminar, it's if they don't cut, it's generally because the negative hone is too thick. You just have to. There are two ways of doing it. Either you edge it, it's still too thick, you can edge it again, or if you edge it and it's too thick, it doesn't cut, then I hone the two blade flat again and just try to narrow it down on the hone side rather than taking metal away. So there's two ways of doing that, but you have to make sure that the negative isn't too thick. I don't care what degree it is. It has to be thin. The next thing is that's important is that the solid blade that you put on the flat bar, that it is an eighth of an inch. If it's you don't see any light, that can cause a problem too. It'll bend the hair. The third problem is you can have to set everything good, but if your solid blade doesn't go past the hone line on the tooth blade, it may not cut either. You know what I mean?
Yep. And something else to reiterate, something that we discussed in a previous conversation on the phone, and I've been using this, is that on my negative hone or my ramp, on the right line ramp, I've observed where a lot of times if I'm pulling back, how can I do this? I need to be a little further away. So if this is, I'm pulling back, and a lot of times I pull up because I've seen the teeth on brand new shears where they're not a flat, it's not a flat angle. So I've been using this little pull up to sort of convex that ramp or that negative hone. The other thing that we talked about, and that has been really helpful, is if this is your entire blade, and this is no, I got to go like this. This is the pivot area because this is the way we often look at it. Mm-hmm. Is because it's curved down. A lot of times, I'll see more negative hone in this portion, but not as much at the tip. So you don't have to have your negative hone all the way going to your tip. I find that either with your teeth curling over is a helpful thing, and reducing the negative hone towards the tip, because it was something that you said, is that as your blades come together, you've got more pressure here, and you've got less pressure at the tip. So if you have too much negative hone, there's not enough pressure to overcome the negative hone, and then it'll hold the hair, I've been finding.
Yeah, you nailed that one, Todd, because sometimes when I put the negative hone or the ramp and I use a spinning wheel, I will quit about a 1/4 inch from the tip. Because if you go all the way across in your mind, your hand wipes out the tip. And if I stop at a 1/4 inch, sometimes the negative hone doesn't even, it misses the last 3 or 4 teeth, but it really doesn't matter. The most important part is the very beginning, and then towards the middle, and then some of them don't even have the negative ramp at the tip. So that's very astute on your part.
Yeah, I very seldom will try to achieve a negative hone at the tip. I'll say the last 16, for a typical small finisher, I'll aim for those ones to be not negative hone, because if I don't have a negative hone and they jam, I can always come back and add it. If I put negative hone in all the way to the teeth, then it's harder for me to get rid of that and get
Yeah, you're right. 100% correct.
Problem, because I've added too much negative hone. So you're better off to add the negative hone and work it towards your teeth, assemble it, see how it cuts, and you can always go back and add a little bit more progressively towards the tip to get that performance.
Yeah, 100% agree.
At the end of your first video, you talked about a terrible grind, and that there has to be some twist. Is it, you mean the home grind? Like when you saw that the shear had a terrible grind, I didn't quite understand what you meant by the terrible grind.
No, what I meant is bad grind, the hollow grind. When they made the hollow, the hollow does not have a twist. It's just a straight hollow. And sometimes you have a shear, you can work it all you want, and it just feels crunchy at the tip. It wasn't cut right because it doesn't have that twist in the grind. And so when they're manufactured, rather than grinding flat, you always have the tip up, and that naturally gives it a twist in the grind. It just, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. So it ends up being that there's more of the tooth sticking out. So like it almost like gives you more set up towards the teeth with that hollow grind too.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It breaks the teeth in. If it's a bad hollow, it just kind of falls off. There's no rake to it. And then sometimes you have to put a bit of a bend and a twist right at the tip of the tooth to make them cut.
And one last question that I have is, there was, Dennis, I think, did a video not too long ago of some Sam Neill, what they call no-line shears, where the teeth are the ones that do the cutting. The back blade is the blunt one. So the back blade is the one that gets ramped rather than the teeth. And sometimes, like when Dennis did that, and I was wondering whether or not the Sam Neils that you did in the second part would have been those thinners where they should have been, the back blade is like blunt, like 10,
No, it's
15
5 degrees. It's 5 degrees. Polished.
5 degrees?
Yeah, 5 degrees polished. Because we have one of those shears too, that a Bonika brand model.
And so my question is, how do you identify if someone might have done a previous improper sharpening when you've got these ones that flip the logic that the back blade is it becomes the pusher, and the teeth become the cutter. And he had a good term for that, and I forget what the term is, but normally the teeth are there to push the hair through the back blade to get the back blade to cut. And these other ones, it flips the logic, so now the back blade becomes the one to push, and your teeth are polished. They're the true cutting edge. Any thoughts on how to identify those ones?
I mean, if somebody else has done a bad job.
Can I answer that one? Because we deal with it a lot. It's only going to see them at high-end salons. You're not going to get something like that from a dog groomer. And when they give them to you, the teeth are sharp and the other blade's sharp, and they just cut into each other, and you know. But there'll be one of 3 brands. We have a Bonika one, there's a Sambila, and then I think Sensei has one. There'll probably be more eventually. But yeah, it's pretty obvious when you get one. If they've done it wrong.
Yeah, just go through the same process. Hone, and put your negative where it is, and the other one, make sure you hone it through, and it's all in the hone. Well, how aggressive stone do you use, Todd, when you hone?
For my honing is 2,000 grit nano for my ride line. I love it. I can put in additional slur if I need it to be a little bit more aggressive. For when I need it, but it's a beautiful, gives me that nice, it's the only stone I use. I don't go for a super polish. I find that it works just fine. The biggest thing that I also notice is that after I flatten my stone, it's a lot coarser. And as you work it in, either with a, what's our other stone called? Bonnie?
Nagura?
Yeah, the Nagura stone. The Nagura stone really does bring that coarseness after I flatten to be a really nice, not polished, but smooth surface. And it's a step that I just absolutely love, and I can always tell after I flatten my water stone to after I've been using it for a while as to how, I want to say, beautifully the surface becomes. Like it's just silky smooth without being sticky.
Yeah. A lot of people will argue that they like to use like a 6,000 stone, and our experience is 1,000 is a great job. It's a little rougher. Put 3,000, smoother, polishes it. But once you hit a 6,000 plus, it does nothing. It doesn't cut anything. It dulls it more. So I get everybody has a different thought on it, but my thought is, once you hit 3,000, it's a waste. And some people use it. My brother says 1,000 is enough. I like to put a 3,000 behind it. Just depends on who your customer is. I love it when they give me a Sambia, say these are dry cutting shears. All that means is I'll hone it, edge it, hone it, and then if it cuts nice, maybe I'll do like a normal shear, hone it, edge it, hone it, deburr it, and then I'll run it across like 30 micron, and just cut the burr off. That becomes our dry cutting shear. Maybe I'll do it on both sides. And another thing, if you do a super cuts, or people that do a lot of men's cutting, if you ask me to do primary dry cutting, that's what I do. Just one side, 30 mic, put a fresh edge, don't polish it.
Something that you mentioned earlier, dragon teeth. I think I've seen most of my dragon teeth shears where the teeth are still round. The idea is the dragons are better notches for holding the hair going across the blade. So you basically, like, I never ever touch the outside. If this is my shear and this is my flat hone, I basically never sharpen my tooth side. But And I always think of it that purpose of that tooth is to be able to hold the hair across the cutting blade. And on those ones, I've seen most of the time that they are ramped on the tooth to help as the blade comes down, that ramp just sort of glides them down and prevents that digging in.
Again, with those, again, I'm really aggressive with the hone, make sure it's honed nicely through. If I have to, I use a cheater stick. And if I want to put edge the outside, which I won't, I'll either use a Suba pad or a buffing wheel and hit it, because even hitting on a buffing wheel is going to either kick the burr over, or if you have a harder buffing wheel, it will create some sort of edge. There's some people like I think Ward Collins, that he loves buffing wheels because in essence he is creating an edge or a burr with his buffs. So on the drag teeth, if it doesn't cut, sometimes try that, either Suba or a buffing wheel, so you don't damage the teeth, make it look ugly.
Yeah, I follow your guidelines. The inside hone is the most important part in working the teeth. If you don't ever touch the outside, if you don't absolutely have to. The only thing that I ever do right now is I'll just use the cheater stick whenever I need to just drag something across that. One thing that wasn't touched on at all was the thin shears that are tooth to tooth. The principles, I think, are always the same, that you're going to have one that you're going to ramp, one's going to be the cutter. The same principles are there. Some of them are curved so the teeth match in. Sometimes they are straight and they don't match as they come together. So they sort of pirouette together. I think is the best way to describe it. Some of them, and this is where I think I've had the problem with these ones, and I always say, if I have to walk away, those are the shears I would walk away from. And the reason for it is sometimes the shear, depending on which way it is, some like to be cutting where the teeth are coming down, other ones have the teeth coming up. And I found that depending on the configuration, they cut differently.
You're absolutely correct. Even if you have blending shears where if you cut, if they're even handled, if the teeth are up, it roughs it up. If the teeth are down, it gives a smoother cut because the hair falls in. So teeth up, roughs it up, teeth down, smoother. So you're correct there again. Dang, Todd, I need you as my sidekick, because there are a lot of things that you say that are correct that either forgot or good reasoning. I do that to Dennis Brooks when he talks. I throw questions at him. So it's always hard when you're by yourself to cover everything. And you have a scientific mind. I remember talking to you. I'm like, this guy is way more scientific than I am.
I like the way he articulates things. I was making some notes, some things I was going to, because it's hard to explain things, and he's done a good job.
I like pirouette.
Pirouette. I like the walking the light down the ride line. I wrote that down. That's exactly what you do.
I think you have a presentation person now, Bonnie.
It's got a long way to come down from Canada. Jim or Patrick, y'all have any questions?
Can somebody explain to me the difference between thinners, blenders, and chunkers?
Good question.
Yeah, the true definition of thinners are when you have teeth on both sides and they match. That's old school German, and it's thinning because you would go deep in the hair or the coat. If you're talking a dog, you cut, you'd be able to pull out without opening up. If you use a blending shear, which has a solid tooth, if you go in deep, you have to cut and open and comb it out. If you're doing hair, and if it's nice and sharp, obviously you can cut and it pulls without relief. Chunking shear, the beauty is where you have a wider gap. and it gives more texture. Sometimes you have a wide gap, and the tooth is equal to the gap for notching. Sometimes you'll have 3 thin teeth, a gap, and 3 thin teeth. It takes out very little, but all texture. But the funny thing is, in the pet grooming industry, they call it chunkers, where they have the wide teeth, little gap, wide teeth, little gap. So you can do an entire haircut and not have the lines in the hair, but it doesn't chunk anything at all. I mean, it takes out nearly as much as a shear does, but they call it a chunker. But, you know, when you're in a salon and somebody says, will you fix my thinners, and they're really blending shears, I just say yes, because I don't want them to feel stupid. I don't want to make them think I'm a know-it-all. So I'm like, yeah, okay. I don't argue with them.
Any texturizers, they're all there for texturizing. Depends on the degree of texturizing. So I think people don't need to get hung up on what term people use, different salesmen, because in the end, it's all marketing. It's just a marketing term.
And what is a texturizer? I've heard that term.
Go ahead, Todd.
What is a texturizer?
It's a shear to cause different lines or different depths of into the hair. So like, think of it as a shear, just a regular straight shear. It cuts a straight line. Your texturizer is to add texture to the depth of the hair. So what you're doing is you're not cutting the hair evenly straight across. You're cutting parts of it, and then you're pulling those pieces that were cut out. So you're adding texture. Same thing that can be done with how stylists will now use the point cutting to do texturizing rather than texturizers.
Well, I was thinking more along the lines of what category does a texturizer fall into? Is it a thinner, blender, or a chunker? Or are they all three texturizers?
That's the better way to think of it. All three are providing some texturizing capability.
Can I answer this too? Because I deal more with hairstylists than I do with the groomers. And I had one tell me, if you cut close to the scalp, it's a thinning shear. If you cut toward the end of the hair, it's a blending. And if you cut in the middle, you're texturizing. So all of them would do whatever you needed them to do. But, you know, for women, you want to get a haircut, but you don't want to look like you got a haircut. So you want the ends to be a little bit scraggly. And that's what the texture they're talking about.
Well, that's good to know, Bonnie, because it's more about technique and not the actual tool itself.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have a lot of hairstylists say all of them, just like Todd said, all of them are texture shears because you're creating texture in the hair.
It's like a lot of times, a barber would take the thinning or texturizing shear to remove bulk, to get fluffy hair to sort of lay a little flatter. So it's different. I'll say a texturizer is any shear with teeth.
And it also depends on the texture of the person's hair, because I know we've worked with a barber that was an educator, and she would use different type of configurations of teeth depending on the person's texture to create what she called remove the they come up here with the clippers, but then they have that line in the back of their head, and she would use different shears depending on the texture of the person's hair. So it'd be fine if they're fine hair, it'd be coarser, more spaced out if it was like curly, coarser hair. So, but I'm not a hairstylist, I just watch them. But do we have some more questions? We got 14 minutes left.
Yeah, Patrick, do you groom your dog?
Can't hear you, Patrick.
No, I don't. I have someone groom them for me, but she was my first sharpening customer.
Yeah, and she's still a customer. I know I've got some sharpeners that wish they had started out 3 hours away from their home base.
That's what I did.
Yeah, because they lost business.
I tried grooming my dog once, and boy, that was a mistake. Leave it to the professionals.
Yeah, I started out, I drove 45 minutes from home, and that's where I started sharpening.
Did you guys ever get like Italian shears or the German shears, the blending shears?
Yes,
Pain in the butt, aren't they?
I don't like them. You know, it always seems to be that whether they're going to cut after you sharpen them is a hit or miss proposition, and most of the time they will, but if they don't, it's like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna have to figure this out here.
Yeah. I know that you're going back and forth and putting edge on there, deburring, and the trick really is having to put a twist in the blade, particularly the blending blade, to get the teeth in. And the reason why I know so much about the twist is because I used to have to do all the crappy anvil shears. I shouldn't say crappy, the less expensive anvil shears. We had to make them cut. The only way to make them cut is to put twist in the blade. And I don't think I showed it there, but I have a brass block, you know, with the little slots in it. I have it in a vise, put the blade in the vise. I take a baby crescent, and that's what I use to give a little in the back.
You showed that in your video that is in the archives.
Oh, did I? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's key to have. Having, just in general, having a little baby crescent, that block in the vise, so you can use, you know, both hands. Yeah, and that's also the key when it comes to curved blending shears too. A lot of times, you know, like it won't cut, it won't cut, it won't cut. You have to put a little twist in the blade, in the tooth blade.
See, I'm not strong enough. Please, go on.
So on the tooth blades, or in any blade, but usually it's on the tooth blades, when I start to hone them on the stone, I'll hone the whole blade, and I'll notice that the ride area is not coming in very well, but the hone line is, and so I can waste a lot of time keep going at it. But what I find to be most effective, and I want to ask you if this is a good thing to do because it seems to work for me, is I will take the blade off the stone and only work the ride area where the pivot is. And just do that. So I know I'm touching both sides of the pivot area. I know it's going to come in. I'll work it until it does come in. Then I'll do the rest of the blade. And it seems to save me a lot of time and a lot of aggravation. Do you find that's a good way to approach things like that?
Yeah, I think it's great because a lot of times if shear gets hung up, it gets hung up in the ride area. And yeah, no, I think it's terrific. Yeah. And but even if you do a shear or blender, you don't have a full, they call it the J, I guess it's called the J, ride line. It doesn't have to be full. Because some people say, oh, it has to look pretty all the way. And if you take too much of it, you're taking too much metal. So you don't need that, you don't need it all to be pretty.
Yeah, yeah. The shear is almost like a house, and you have to have a good foundation, and the J area is sort of like the foundation. That's going to be good for the rest of it to be good. That's kind of like the way it works for me. But.
Yeah.
And what do you work that J area with, Patrick? That J area, what are you working it with?
Just on my stone. I got a 1K nano diamond, and that's my favorite stone. But anyway, I just put it on the very edge. I let the blade hang off the edge, and I just work the J. Very small, little short strokes, just to work the J until that comes in. But only when I need to do that. And when that comes in, the rest of the blade comes in pretty quickly.
Hey, Todd.
So I never ever separate, like if I'm doing my ride line, I never turn around and say I'm just working the J. The J is whatever the J is that's set by the factory, and says there can be gaps in there, like because it's a pivot area, it doesn't have to be continuous all the way around. It's your bearing surface, but it's not really that important. So I always just deal with the ride line. Because it's part and parcel, like when you're putting the pressure on, to say, how does that work? the one thing that Bonnie showed me when I was doing the training with her is that if you have the back part, like in the presentation, you had the back part closer to the pivot, sometimes the ride line just doesn't get there. So you have to work, either take the J area down, and that's the only time you're trying to lower it is when the inside, or the ride line close to the pivot isn't working. Something that Bonnie shows in her videos all the time is working the ride line over the edge or over the corner of the whetstone. So I do that if I have to. But the other thing too is that I always be very cautious with the teeth. I don't want to be too aggressive. I don't want to get a huge ride line area. So when you're doing the teeth, I want to say, be cautious. Like, you can go to sort of town on the back blade, but on the teeth, be careful because they hone down very quickly. I find the teeth are a softer metal than the back blade when you come to honing the teeth, because they come up, the ride line on them comes up way faster. You have to be careful with how much pressure and how much you work the teeth.
Yeah. Hey, Todd, if I were you, I'd invest in 1,000 as well. I know you love your 2,000, but sometimes if you want to get it and save your 2,000, no, I'm serious, because you like how clean the 2,000 is.
No, well, there's been times that I have to chamfer. So the other term that where you talk about doing the inside when you have to narrow the J area because they're not continuous. So when I do chamfering, I have a diamond 1,300. So when I chamfer and I've got a huge gap in there, I've gone all the way down to my 300 diamond plate, started there until I get something established, and then I'll flip over to the 1,000 on the other side of it on my diamond plate, and then I'll finish up. So I do have 1,000.
Okay.
It's not that I don't.
And then you should get two 2,000 grit stones. That way when one gets worn out, you get the fresh one. You don't have to worry about cleaning it.
And you can flip it over.
I flip it over. And the other thing too that I do is a lot of times, like this is the stone, so this is where I'm working it, right? Mm-hmm. So what times I'm working this way, then I'll turn around, take my stone and do this. So now I'm on this side. So instead of always working one side, so I got with this side, flip it over, then I got this side, and this side. And I don't have to go very often between flattening my stone because I just got to keep track of, okay, when was the last time I flipped it? Or if I have a problem, I'll try flipping it and see if this solves the problem.
Yeah, Jim, you haven't said anything. I haven't learned any of your tricks.
I am a newbie. I could talk to you for hours, Ramon. But I do have one quick question. I believe you're mainly groomers.
Who, me? No, I do groom. I do both, but yeah.
Well, I'm in the process of gathering equipment, learning, and I want to be mobile. And big obstacle there right now is the cost of vans is outrageous. And but one thing I found out quickly talking to groomers is they want their sharpener to do their dog blower maintenance and repairs. I don't know if you found that to be true or not.
It's more true that they want you to do their clippers and their shears, but if you can do their blowers, it's a bonus. And I mean, it's not rocket science. You just gotta take the two fans out, and they're what do you call the little
Rushes.
Oh yeah, carbon.
Yeah, that actually came naturally. That I grew up as a mechanic and went to school to be an engineer and stuff. So that was a no-brainer. But I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out how long does it take to build up a decent customer base where you can go full time.
Ooh, Bonnie, that's you.
I know. The people I'm talking to that I'm training, if they get out there and work a 40-hour week, they can almost immediately jump into full time. There's business out there. But now you have to figure out your time invested. Let's say you're fixing the dryers because they want you to do the dryers. Can you make a whole lot more money sharpening shears?
Yes, it's not a high profit item. However, if it'll keep that customer base happy, I'd hate to lose clippers and grooming sharpening to some guy that comes through town and says, I'll do your blowers too. And it's not, like Ramon said, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, but I mean, there's something the Bible says about not leaning to the edge of the field. I mean, I leave some of that stuff for those people that don't need to make as much money as I want to make.
I've worked on a few dryers, and I can tell you they're probably some of the most disgusting things you'll ever take apart.
They are nasty, and I've got two of them out in the shop right now. One of them's fixed. I'm waiting for a couple of parts for the second one. And this is somebody that came to me as a recommendation from another groomer, but she right off the bat says, no, I'm good on my sharpening. And I told her, I said, I'm going to fix your blowers, but I'd really like to have a shot at your sharpening business.
Well, I think you answered your question. So somebody's sharpening and not do the blower.
Yeah. We got about 3 minutes left. Any comments you want to make, Ramon, or any comments you want to make to Ramon?
No, I think when it comes to blending shears, it can be so much easier and quicker than doing a shear, because not many people are good at it. And then if someone asks you if you do blending shears, you go, yeah, I specialize in them. Gives them confidence. And once you get it, you get it. Make sure that negative ramp is thin and solid blade overlaps the hone. Make sure that it's not wiped out on the tooth side. Make sure you do a really aggressive ramp the first 3 tips. Man, they're easy, especially dog grooming. When I see 4 or 5 or 6 of them in front of the line, I'm like, oh yes, because I just rock them out so much faster.
And to add to that, I always treated thinning or texturizers as my nemesis. When Ramon and I talked previously, I still call them my nemesis because they can be the ugliest, the hardest, because there's so many different variations out there. So you never ever know, okay, what am I going to do with this one? Is it 20 degrees? Is it 30 degrees? Is it 40 degrees? Is it 10 degrees? Is it 5 degrees? But the thing is about nemesis, don't shy away from them. You learn from your mistakes. Never shy away from thinners. Persevere the pain and go into it. And every time you have one in your hand, you're going to get better.
And you don't get bored with them.
Bonnie.
Huh?
Thank you, Ramon and Bonnie.
We're enjoying doing this, so thank you for being us. There should have been more people here, but I've recorded it. And it's ending now, so